Can
Hold on.
anybody else hear me?
Hold on a second.
Yes, Janet, it's
Go
her.
ahead. Gotcha.
Yes,
Okay, yeah, I'm here.
Thank you so much. Welcome everybody to the Monticello Central School District Board of Education meeting for this evening. I'd like to remind everybody that this is being recorded. Kathleen Doherty is here via phone, so we have full board that is present with us this evening. And I just want to remind everybody that because of this format, it's difficult for us to have any question period, but if you do have questions, at any point during this broadcast, or if you are watching it post, you can certainly send any questions to our board clerk, Janet Montez, at jmontez@k12mcsd.net. And we will answer it during the question and answer period today if we can, and if not, we will make sure that it gets posted so that it goes into our minutes as public comment always does, with answers to the public so that everybody is able to see that answer and the question. With that said, I'd just like to start by saying that we need to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and then if everybody would be so kind to wait after that for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. One of the hardest things for me to have to do as the board president is to recognize when we have people from our Monticello Panther family who have passed. In this particular situation, this is a tough one. Two are older people from our family, but two of them were former students of mine, and it takes a totally different light with regard to that. I do want to just note that in the process of all of this, to our understanding, none of them were COVID related. So I like to stipulate that in advance as well. So first we have Rebecca Dekker Schroeder. She is a graduate of the class of 1996. She was a bright spirit. She had been ill for a while, and she didn't stop fighting ever. She continued on to do what it was that she needed to do and to inspire many others, inclusive of me, in the process, and our thoughts are with her family now and always. The second death was that of Pat Van Etten, who was our school nurse in the high school from 1974 to 1989. She dealt with so many of us sitting right here in this room for so many different issues. But the one thing that I can say strongly about Pat, and I knew her privately because I knew the family privately, but within school, and even whenever I would go over to her house, the one thing that you could always guarantee from Pat is she had a smile. She was warm, she was kind, and she was caring. And our hearts are out to the Van Etten family and everybody who knew her. The next person only worked for us for 2 short years. And the reason she only worked for us for 2 short years was because she fell in love with somebody who worked in the district. And back in those days, you couldn't work in the same district as your spouse. So she left, and Liberty was lucky enough to get her for the rest of her career, I believe. But Marianne Kaiser, wife to Dr. Kaiser, who our middle school is named after, she passed. And although she was only with us for 2 years, any of us who knew Mrs. Kaiser knew that there wasn't a single thing that Dr. Kaiser went to in this school district that she wasn't there with him. A concert, a game, a musical, during the debate tournaments, she would be with him. She was right by his side, and she knew each student as though that student was her students still, right to the day that Dr. Kaiser retired. She lit up a room when she walked in. She was a kind and caring soul who always had a smile on her face and always made sure that you felt welcomed. I remember a story that I shared with her family, with her daughter Joanne, who's very friendly with me, and we went to school together. I shared that, you know, I've shared before that my parents passed away when I was in high school. So Mrs. Kaiser would come over and she would always congratulate me and tell me how proud my parents were of me when there was a concert or something occurred that I didn't have anybody in the audience for because my parents weren't there. And she kind of was like my surrogate parent for the activity, always making sure that somebody was there for me with that flower to say, good job, congratulations. And she always did that. And when I graduated college, she wrote me a little note, and you know, your parents would be very proud of you, as am I. The day that I got married, she and Dr. Kaiser were at the wedding, and they were at the ceremony. And at the ceremony, when on the receiving line, she took the time to give me one of the biggest hugs. I think I still have bruises around my rib cage from it. And she gave me a very big hug, and she said, "And now I can officially say your parents are so proud of you, as are we." And she just always had that way about her. And she did that not just for me, but for anybody who was in her presence, because that's the spirit that she was. So to Dr. Kaiser, to Joanne, to the rest of the Kaiser family, our hearts go out to you. She was such a loving and caring woman, and she will be missed. The last one just recently came in, and we talk about loving and caring and how people are. Jeanette Wilson. She was a graduate of the school 1994. Jeanette was a twin of Donna Davis. I knew Donna a little bit better because she was a little more into the music realm than Jeanette was, but Jeanette was quiet and loving and caring. And she did that right up until her last breath, making sure that she was taking care of others. She worked for many, many years after graduation for the Walnut Mountain Care Group up in Liberty. And most recently, for those of us, if you see her picture, many of us who are sitting here, if you didn't know her, you would recognize her because she worked at Crystal Run Healthcare. And she left children behind who are part of our Monticello family. And her niece also part of the Monticello family. And she just such a beautiful soul, a peaceful soul, a quiet soul who made an impact on so many people's lives because that's how she cared for people. So our hearts are with Donna, her family, and of course, Jeanette's family as a whole, and her children who will need our support as we're moving forward. So I'd like to ask for, in all four of their names, a moment of silence and reflection. Thank you. Thank you. Moving on with the agenda. I'd like to remind everybody to please silence all their electronic devices. I'll entertain a motion to recess with the public, or for a public hearing on the district-wide safety plan made by Mrs. Greco, seconded by Mr. Crumley. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? So ordered. So with that said, Dr. Evans.
Thank you, Madam President. We did note one small minor revision that is necessary in the safety plan, and that is on page 19. It recognizes the former Assistant Superintendent for Administration as being part of the chain of command. This is in error. That should read the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. Dr. Linda Oler Marks. So there's no material change to that safety plan. It is a minor error, and that will be corrected prior to next week's meeting when the plan will be up for formal adoption by the board. So just calling that to the board's attention. And again, it's not a material change, so there's no need for additional time.
Thank you. Mrs. Montez, do we have any questions? Because we've been announcing this now for a couple of weeks that we would be having this. Do we have anything from the public?
No, we do not. Not right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, if there is anything and you have not done anything, we still have till next week where we have to adopt. So please make sure that that goes again to J Montez at k12mcsd.net. The document is available on the records on the website. With that said, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing and to reconvene the meeting made by Mrs. Sharoff, seconded by Ms. Holmes. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? So ordered. Entertain a motion to move the agenda to the table made by Mr. Crumley, seconded by Ms. Holmes. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? So ordered. Additions, deletions, and corrections to the agenda. Anything, Dr. Evan?
I have none at this time. Thank you.
Adoption of the agenda. Motion made by Mrs. Greco, seconded by Ms. Holmes. Any discussion? All in favor? I need to see hands, guys, or I don't know what's, thank you very much. Any opposed? Thank you. I believe that Ms. Weiner, you might be frozen at this point. So if you are, if you could please unmute when we go for the vote, that would be great. Thank you. Moving forward, approval of minutes of July 2nd, 2020, made by Ms. Jersey, seconded by Mrs.
Roden.
Greco. By Mrs. Greco. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So ordered. Approval of minutes of July 2nd, 2020. Made by Mr. Crumley, seconded by? Thank you, Ms. Jersey.
Mr. Schroeder.
Discussion? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I need to see hands. All in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you very much. The motion carries. Approval of, so the first set of minutes was for the July 2nd reorg. The second set is the approval of minutes of July 2nd, the actual meeting. Motion made by Ms. Greco, seconded by Mr. Crumley. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So ordered. Approval of minutes of July 6th made by
Mr. Groden.
Mr. Groden, I can't see your hand, so please don't interrupt because I'm looking at screens for the motions in the seconds. So Ms. Greco, seconded by Mr. Crumley. Any discussion? All in favor? Now those of you who are on phone can take yourself off mute. Thank
Aye.
you. Thank you. Motion to approve the minutes of July 8th. That was the special meeting that we had to have. Motion to approve those minutes made by Mr. Crumley, seconded by Mrs. Greco. Any discussion? Aye. All in favor?
You already got that.
Aye.
Thank you. Approval of minutes July 15th. Also a special meeting. Motion made by Mrs. Greco, seconded by Ms. Galligan. Thank you very much. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So ordered. No student board member updates, no board awards, school reopening plan presented by Dr. Oler Marks. So I'm going to pass the torch to you, Dr. Oler Marks.
Thank you very much. So Janet, do you want to share that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So before we start, I just want to say that this was a complete and total team effort. The administrators have been working around the clock practically. I had multiple conversations with them over the weekend to get this draft to you at this point so that we can make the state deadline of the 31st on Friday. So just starting with that, a very big thank you to all of them, because this is truly integrated in the way this came together.
I'm sorry. I have to be the host again. I'm just waiting to be the host again.
Okay. I can start talking a little bit about the planning process. That's the first slide anyway. So you can go to the next slide, please, Janet. Okay, so as you know, we started the planning in mid-May. Dr. Silver had laid out potential for 5 different scenarios. So we immediately formed 3 different committees, one with the elementary, all 3 buildings working together, the middle school and the high school. We had asked for volunteers. We had administrators, parents, teachers, teaching assistants, related service personnel. And then we asked that members of technology, facilities, security, transportation, and food services were participatory in those departments. So we completed our preliminary planning around mid-June. And we had kind of buckets of categories that are, health and safety, transportation, the kinds of issues that we ultimately had to deal with. And then because of that, right, understanding that we were going to have multiple scenarios, we planned summer professional learning to support remote and blended instruction with our tech integrators and with BOCES. And then we also have been supportive of teachers in curriculum writing to adjust the scope and sequence in all areas and all grades over the course of the summer. Additionally, we did a parent survey. And we had over 1,300 responses to the parent survey. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that survey impacted some of our planning when we get to that slide. Then in mid-July, more guidance was released. As you're all aware, we got guidance from the Department of Health, the Board of Regents, the CDC, the Department of Education, and that guidance came to us through the afternoon of July 16th. So you can see that it's been a very compressed timeline. The committees have been meeting regularly. Some of the committees have been meeting almost daily. Facilities, transportation, food services, technology, and security worked both in conjunction with the committees and also separately for the mandated components that were part of the 145-page Department of Education guidance. The district nurses also got together to develop health and screening protocols for the district. Next slide, please. So we had 3 priorities in setting up the plan. The first, obviously, is the health, safety, and well-being of our students and staff. And that is not just the physical health of our students, but we're also concerned and prioritizing the mental, emotional support for our students and staff. The second priority is the quality of teaching and learning within the plan and how we can assure that that is at the primary part of our decision making. And the third is fiscal responsibility to the extent that we can to meet the guidance from the state on all levels to ensure that we're doing it in a responsible way. So what we found when we surveyed the parents is fully a third of the parents requested a fully remote option. Other parents have asked for some semblance of return to school. And so in looking at space limitations, so the guidance is very clear in saying that we need to have 6 feet of space around our students, 12 feet in gym and in chorus and other activities that require heavier breathing or barriers between students. And so looking at our space constraints in all of our buildings and trying to plan for as much of our population to come in as possible, even though we know from the survey that a third of the parents at that time said that they were not comfortable in returning their students to the school buildings. We're planning for full capacity. So what that looks like for us is a 4-cohort model. So we would have 2 cohorts that the majority of our students would be placed into. These cohorts are in-person instruction for 2 days during the week and 3 days of remote instruction. So we would have in-person instruction for cohort A on Mondays and Tuesdays, remote instruction on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Cohort B would be remote learning on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and then in-person instruction on Thursday and Friday. We would have very deep cleaning and sanitizing of the buildings on Wednesday. So the school buildings would be closed on Wednesday. Cohort C, which is invitation only at this point as we enter the plan, and that is determined based on the guidance that asked us to prioritize our E&L students, our special ed self-contained students, and that is also our students entering kindergarten. We're also prioritizing, in the name of equity, students in households that do not have internet access, which was reported to you at a previous board meeting after we did our digital equity survey. And then cohort D would be fully remote learning. Next slide, please. What we're looking at is a phased opening. This is a really complicated endeavor, ensuring health and safety. There are many components in terms of thinking about transporting our students. We have very limited capacity on the buses. And so we have to do a staggered cohort drop-off, which requires coordination at the building level in terms of screening, temperature taking, and ensuring that our students enter the building safely. And then the policies and procedures that occur once the students are in the building. And so we're looking to do a grade by grade phased opening. We're also looking to add components as appropriate as the school year continues. So some of those components would be before and after care. And that's fund independent because we still don't know about the Empire funding for the after school program. And that also includes activities and extracurricular opportunities. We have surveyed advisors for extracurriculars and activities and have asked for potential for remote starts to some of those extracurriculars. And so in the plan, you will see the ones that the building leaders have approved as appropriate in a remote environment. And then cohort C, we will definitely take a look at the numbers of students that are in cohort C that are attending school in person 4 days a week, and the capacity of the school buildings as we phase in. Next slide, please. And so as Dr. Evans has mentioned, we are looking for informed choices by our families because obviously planning is dependent upon understanding how many of our students will be opting into either cohort A and B, and those of students that would be opting into cohort D. Just as a clarification, the students in cohort A and B, that is not a choice about whether I want Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, because that's dependent upon the zones in transportation. And this way we can prioritize keeping family groups together through that process. So we're looking to have parent enrollment forms out to parents by August 7th. We're having building informational Zoom Q&As with the building principals by the week of August 10th. And then we're asking for parent commitment forms to be, enrollment forms to be submitted after the informational Q&As are completed. So that is my presentation, and I am available for questions. The plan, the draft of the plan itself is also loaded in the information section.
So thank you, Dr. Oler-Marx. We're back to full screen so I can see people's faces again. Are there any questions from any of the board members? Okay, so Ms. Jersey.
So you're looking at if you have, let's say, middle school and high school students that also have elementary students in their family. You're looking to make sure that you're collaborating so they all go to school on the same days in case the older students have to, let's say, watch their younger siblings.
That is correct.
Sorry.
Anybody else? Do you have another question, Ms. Jersey? I'm
I
sorry.
do.
Go ahead.
So the cohort C, the A, B, C, and D all take place in one time, is what you're saying?
So cohort A and B, right, where A would be in face-to-face, like everybody's having instruction for 5 days. Cohort A would be in for face-to-face with teachers on Monday and Tuesday. Cohort B would be in on Thursday and Friday. Cohort C is in on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And cohort D would be fully remote.
Now, would that be live instruction as they would keep their periods going, or?
So yeah, so one of the things that we're looking at as we further, because the devil's in the details, right? So as we further develop the plan, right, is thinking about, of course, we want to encourage structure and schedule with our students. But the reality of a teacher, right, if I was a high school English teacher for 25 years. So if I'm teaching a class of 10th graders and I have 11 children in front of me and I have 14 children existing, if I'm live streaming on a computer that I have to pay attention to as well as the students in front of me, that is not a recipe for success, because where I'm valuable as a teacher is in the feedback that I give to students, and I'd be incapable of doing that if I was trying to do both the students in front of me as well as the students that are in the streaming in. So we're looking at and the principals and administrators and I and with Dr. Evans spent the last 2 days diving deeply into blended learning models. And there are some models that are very much more appropriate for the younger grades and some models that are more appropriate for the older grades. And so we're working around building capacity within those models so that we're appropriate in our instruction.
So I do want to remind people, by the way, Dr. Evans didn't bag on us. He just lost internet because storms are coming through. So, so Dr. Oler Marks, you and I are as we move the meeting forward till he can find a way to get back on. Gotta love it. We gotta love our broadband service. Woohoo! So with that said, I just want to remind people who are also listening, the state gave us, we were very, very lucky because we had vision and foresight to start planning early. There are districts that waited and waited and waited, and the turnaround time has not been the best for them, to say the least. Our district was very proactive, started looking very early when we knew what was going on, and all of these meetings started to happen so that we would be prepared. So when the governor said July 31st and state ed said July 31st, these plans have to be up to state ed, we were in a good position to send a plan. But the reality is, so that people understand the timeline, the guidelines, the portal for us to upload the plan that has been presented to us in an overview tonight, the deadline for that is the 31st. The governor will not be making a decision as to what's going to happen with school districts until next week. So all of this planning could be for naught. We don't know. Or the governor could say, plans are great in place. Let's keep going in this direction. Let's continue with this process. And on September 1st, say, yeah, I'm glad you had all this in place, but no, schools are not reopening. Just as quickly as he shut down our ability to go to school on March 13th, he can step in at any time and shut this down the same way. What the plans are going to look like, what the capacity is, Again, another concern, and it sticks in my head, and I'm going to say this, and Dr. Evans has heard me say it, and Mrs. Fella has heard me say it, as Dr. Oler Marks has heard me say it. We may not be able to get the PPE that we're required to have in order to be able to open the doors because every school is looking for that same PPE. So we might need to make adjustments. We might find that transportation, that more people really are going to need the transportation, so that 1/3 is going to look a little bit different than it needed to look. We don't know any of it yet. It's, as you've heard me say before, we're building the plane while it's in the air. And the work that has been done to come up with options that are solid, that will be able to keep our children and our staff and our faculty as safe as possible within the guidelines, has been pursued in this plan. But note, this plan can change. We heard it today, could change tomorrow. It could change 3 weeks from now. It could change in November. And we need people to understand you have to be flexible because we don't know what tomorrow brings. If we've learned anything through this, we don't know what tomorrow brings. So I didn't mean to step on your thunder there, Dr. Oler Marks, but I wanted people to have clarity of what that timeline really does look like.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, and I mean, it is very complicated in terms of thinking about how our buildings obviously were not designed for this. And so, as I mentioned, the principals have been working so very hard with their teams in ascertaining the capacity of each and every classroom because they're not all the same size, and thinking about traffic flow. So for example, the hallway outside the main office at KLR is just over 6 feet. So if you think about how you socially distant people, that's not a two-way hallway. So then so all of these questions, right? Like in thinking about how do we ensure the safety of all the students as they come in, what does that look like? Where do they go? So there's a lot of moving pieces to this.
And again, I'm going to go on my platform for just a half a second because this is a sore subject for anybody who knows me. But we made clear when we put out bonds that we had fiscal responsibility in putting out the bonds, but rationale that said if God forbid another 9/11. Well, this is beyond a 9/11, and included in that, I mean, you have to think about the buses that now have to come in from Bethel on possibly a double or triple run to get a student cohorts in. That's costing this district money. And we have no choice. It is what it is. So the reality is at some point, Mrs. Stella can come in and say, hey guys, nope, there's no more money in the till. And there's no more money in the till, there's no more money in the till. So that could be part of this discussion as well. We have no information yet from the federal government with regard to, are they going to give any relief to schools? Is there going to be anything to local governments? We don't know any of that yet. And the bottom line is the costs are going to be exorbitant in the transportation, far more than the norm. Because of that several times driving to the buildings, and it's going over those same routes again. The more kids you can get on a bus, one route in is a lot cheaper than 3 routes in with a lot less kids on the bus. So people need to be aware of, there's a lot of moving pieces and continue to be a lot of moving pieces. And there was a reason why we were trying to get other buildings open and moving, because that could have been a good solution on this. So please consider that in the future. Ms. Jersey?
In the detail of the remote learning, so parents can choose. I mean, I think it's important for us to describe what kind of instruction they're going to get, what kind of course offerings they're going to get. Are they going to get the same course offerings? Are they going to get live instruction? Are they going to keep periods? I think for parents, in order to make those decisions, those details need to be put out to them.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
I'm sorry, those particular details will be part of this letter that goes to the parents, and then in the question answer sessions.
Right.
So because it's different for every school building, because every school building has different space needs based upon what they have to offer.
Dr. Oler Marks, do you want to speak? And you'll forgive me, I was booted offline by my service here. would you mind speaking a little bit to some of the options being considered? Did I miss that relative to remote learning?
Oh, yeah. So we talked a little bit that we were looking at different models. So some of them are like the flip model. And again, it goes to what makes the teacher valuable, right? So like, as a former English teacher, I could say, oh yeah, my content, that was what made me so valuable, but it's not my content, right? It is the feedback that I give to students to help support their growth in their skills and in their content understanding. And so it's thinking about how you maximize the abilities of the teacher in the places where he or she is most valuable. And I totally get it. You know, I'm a parent. I totally understand that that decisions are made on. So what does it mean if I come to school? What would be different than if I stayed home? What's the value add, right? Because there are many parents that are grappling with with that decision. And so that's the part of the presentations at the building level that we're going to make clear. We are, because we just kind of worked through all of the space capacities, we are working through the scheduling options right now. We completely understand that although it would be really easy to say, oh, we're just going to start with the core classes, we understand what is important in terms of a whole education for students. And so looking at all of the special areas and the areas that make our district unique are looking at how we fit all of those components in. We just got today, for example, we just got information from Syracuse University on our Syracuse University courses and what the requirements are in terms of minutes and face-to-face instruction, et cetera. So it's a kind of a constantly moving target for us, but we're working to get as much of our course catalog and opportunities for students to be available in whatever way we can.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board with regard to this? Okay, thank you. I just want to remind people that if you've got questions or anything, that will have to be handled in public session. We are not in public, or excuse me, it has to be held during question and answers later in the agenda. This right now is still part of the business meeting of the board. With that said, I'd like to ask Dr. Oler Marks if you would be so kind to please do our DSEP plan.
I definitely will.
Thank you.
Sure. So as I mentioned at the last board meeting, the board needs to take action and approve our district comprehensive improvement plan before August 13th. So the entire plan is available in the information section, but just as a reminder, Janet, if you go to the next slide, please. As a reminder, we were targeted as a district for in need of improvement based on our 2018-19 assessment results because we're not adequately supporting the growth and achievement of our African-American students across the district, particularly in the middle school. So we need to create both a district comprehensive improvement plan and a school improvement plan for the middle school. That timeline has not yet been set by the state because of the COVID school building closures. Next slide, please. So what did we do? We collected data as part of our needs assessment. We conducted surveys of parents, students, faculty, and staff. We examined student performance data for the New York State 3.8 exams, the NWEA results, the Regents exams. We looked at discipline data, referrals and suspensions, and we looked at attendance and chronic absenteeism. Some of that data was presented at the last board meeting. We also conducted 2 stakeholder meetings. These happened via Zoom. We had a fairly large group participating in that. Dr. Evans was part of that. We also had district and building administration, teachers, related service personnel, and parents. And the group worked to set priorities as part of the planning process. We're required by the state to set 5 priorities. And then we needed to conduct a root cause analysis and an action plan to address those root causes. The action plan is part of the plan that is in the information section. Next slide, please. So these are our 5 priorities developed by the Planning Committee. The first is to fully adopt an anti-racism framework, improving services and the learning experience for Black students through adult behavior change. The second is to create a culture of inclusivity and belonging to increase student engagement, improve student outcomes. The third is to focus on a system of social emotional learning, restorative practices, and mental health supports to eliminate barriers to learning. The fourth is to deliver strong inquiry-based instruction and increased academic intervention both in and after school. And just so you know that all 5 of those priorities you'll note in the plan have a COVID, how we would do this within COVID as part of the planning. And then the 5th is to ensure that the reopening and recovery efforts are implemented in a way that ensures both student safety and equity. Any questions?
Any questions around the table? Mrs. Sharoff? You need to unmute.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm on a different. Well, I was just curious, the one how we are impacting and changing adult behavior. Could you expound on that?
Sure. So part of what we understand about the gap in performance that we see in African-American students, and this is not just Monticello, this is across the nation, is thinking about how we often, as educators, enter classrooms with implicit biases. So part of that is developing, part of the plan you'll see is developing awareness of those implicit biases, and then working to develop a culturally responsive framework for our instruction, as well as our curriculum.
So like in-service plan to address these kinds of things I mean, it's a great statement, but I think it's really, really hard to change adult behaviors, frankly.
For sure it is. And you know, I think it's, first of all, I can say that within the district, there are many teachers that are doing this work this summer, that they feel compelled to address the situation. And what we understand about helping students, right, is that if you know, you can say, oh, we're just going to try to raise all boats and we'll work really hard at that. Or you can target the population of students that is the most disenfranchised and struggles the most. And by doing that, you actually improve instruction for all. And so you're coming at it from a different direction in order to raise the quality of instruction for everybody. So while the plan itself looks highly targeted to particular populations, the impact of the self-reflection and then the differences in systems and structures and policies that we develop as a result of this work will ultimately positively impact all of our students.
Thank you. Very nice.
Okay, Kathleen has the comments. So Mrs. Doherty?
Yeah, it's just an observation on my part, and maybe I didn't digest this properly, but the kids, if you speak to the kids, and I find it that they have a completely different perception of what goes on than what we perceive they think goes on. They don't see as much turmoil, if you will, as maybe adults at large see. And I'm speaking in general, but it's interesting when you see them interact in a social setting or hear what they're saying without you really realizing that you're listening.
Yeah, and the only thing I can say to that is that we were very careful to ensure that we were collecting student responses to surveys. And I think that some of those responses were eye-opening in terms of how many of our students felt that they had experienced instances of bias and discrimination within school building, and then how their sense of belonging within the school building is not consistent. And so there weren't like huge numbers of students who responded to the survey that said, oh, I never feel like I belong. But rather what we saw was huge numbers of respondents that said, sometimes I feel like I don't belong in school. And so those are the kinds of things that, that we look to address. And I think it's important that we do the same survey, ask those questions multiple times, right? That we do it yearly so that we can see, are we making growth in these areas and see, yeah, to see what kind of impact the work has.
Interesting. I just think that it's well, it's very complicated, and it's in other words, that my personal feedback with many of the kids that are recent graduates is just that the data isn't reflective of what you get from that personal feedback from a lot of kids. But every experience is different,
Sure.
so it's a hard thing to really nail down.
It definitely is. It definitely is, right?
Thank you. Any other questions around the table? Okay, give me half a second because again, I'm doing multiple.
I think Jen has a question.
Jen, Ms. Holmes?
Yeah, so one of the priority was basically to implement, well, to I don't know, roll out inquiry-based learning. And how are you planning to do that?
So inquiry-based learning, right, is learning that is focused on the higher levels of thinking in Bloom's taxonomy, right? So that we're trying to not engage. And I'm not saying that our teachers do this. I'm saying that it's in general, one of the reactions that we often have when kids seem to have skill deficits is that we fall back on kind of rote learning, right? We got to know this. You got like it's. I'm going to give the example of the multiplication table, right? Like you got to know that, right? You have to know that. You need to know it to be able to be successful in higher order math, right? So by the time you get to algebra, you should have that memorized. If all you did was focus on memorizing the multiplication table, how would kids feel about math? Right? So the things that make math so amazing are is how you apply math, right? It's the conception of math and gaining a conceptual understanding. And so it's ensuring that our instruction has equal weight in the inquiry, right? And so there's ways to structure instruction so that you're doing both. And so it's not giving a short shrift to either skills or inquiry, but ensuring that we have a focus on student-directed kind of questioning to help to build curiosity. And I know that there were questions with the board in the past about attendance, right? And so when we think about chronic absenteeism, oftentimes there's a lot of barriers to attendance that we're not aware of that we need to investigate. But sometimes, particularly with older students, it's also about how we engage, right? And so what is engaging for us as learners is not rote instruction. So how do we get to a place where, let me give you an example. So like when you think about parabolas in math and algebra, right? Like that, you can learn parabolas. It could be kind of interesting, I suppose, if you're really into math. But if you said, hey, you know what, we're going to design some solar ovens and you have to use a parabolic design in order to do that. Suddenly we've shifted the conversation to how we use math, and then math becomes important because we're using it in that moment.
Any other questions around this? Any other comments? Okay, then moving the agenda along. Thank you very much, Dr. Ola Marks. You had a lot of presentations to get ready for us this evening. And we really do appreciate all that you have done. Again, we want to thank the reopening committee. We know that it was not a top-down approach. This was a collective approach since May, inclusive of parents, inclusive of community members, inclusive of all stakeholders within the school district to come up with the best possible plan. Again, I want to reiterate to anybody who is listening, this is exactly that. It is a plan. We plan to have things. When I planned my wedding, I planned, but things could change up until the very last day before things could actually be in place. We still have a lot of answers that we are waiting for from state ed. I know that there are other districts that have put out their information. I know of several Long Island districts that are not putting out a single plan, and their whole goal is they will start with remote learning for everybody and then figure it out because they didn't feel their turnaround time was long enough. So all across the state, plans are at different levels for different reasons. I think that this committee, and I think that the board would agree with me, has done a yeoman's job at putting together what needs to be in place by July 31st, with a clear understanding that first and foremost of anything that we are doing will be the safety of every single student, faculty, and staff member. That is what is of key before we do anything else. So we appreciate your willingness to take the time and concerted effort to ensure that our students will remain safe, our faculty members, our staff members, and anyone who has to be within the school walls for any reason, and that anything that needs to be done with regard to remote learning is being investigated further. I don't think that there is anybody who would say that remote learning was at its best when we had to do it, but considering we had 48 hours to put it into place, I again thank every single teacher, faculty, staff, everything that needed to be done and again, on behalf of the board, to make what we had to make happen. And I know that you were looking at continuing platform changes. What does our infrastructure support? What can our students receive with regard to the guidelines? And we very much appreciate all of the work that has been done. So I think that, people around the table are applauding to a certain extent with regard to that statement. We appreciate the work because it has not been easy, especially when state ed didn't give us guidelines until about 3 weeks ago. So with that said, moving on, Mr. Crumley, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as a group, F1 through M1.
Do you have a second to approve the consent agenda made by Ms. Galligan? Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? So ordered. Moving on to board roundtable. Anybody have anything for board roundtable this evening? I have some stuff, but anybody right now who's got something? Mr. Crumley.
Just to thank you to Dr. Evans for his building level introductions of himself to the members of our district and the parents of our district. And he was doing a fantastic job with everything that he presented. And I thank you very much, Dr. Evans.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Mr. Crumley.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Any other board members at this time?
Madam President,
Yes, Mr. Groden.
I'd like to say congratulations and thank you to everybody who pulled off this Herculean effort to impress upon the public how we need to get the budget done. It was great. I'm just thrilled. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I do have a few things. I did attend the 2-day law conference, so I do know that there are some people. Thank you, Adriana, because I know you were there. I know that Ms. Galligan was there. I do know Mr. Groden was there. So we had some good representation along with Dr. Evans and Ms. Sala and Dr. Ola Marks in and out and dealing with a hard way for us to learn as well. But I think that NYSBA did an excellent job in ensuring that we had information. It is available. Dr. Evans, if you want to just send it out to maybe all the board members who couldn't attend and they can listen to the different sections of it. Did you receive a link for that?
Yes, I did, and we can pass that along. I will say that our law firm has been providing us with a steady stream of partner updates that summarize a lot of what was said there, but it was certainly nice to hear from different attorneys in the field across the state and listening to their different interpretations of guidance and regulation and law and what comes into play when. But I will certainly pass that along.
And certainly lead counsel for NISBA, who's Jay Verona. There's nothing like watching him mediate a meeting like that. It was just great. So we thank him as well. A lot of good information. I also attended the Meet the Superintendents for Cook, RJK, Chase, and Rutherford. I want to thank the building principals and Dr. Evans for putting together incredible information for the parents, for the community members. We had a lot of people on every single one of those, which was nice to see, a good mix of our community. And I was very pleased to see how it was received by the public. And with that said, I want to remind anybody who's got a high schooler that the high school is for tomorrow night. So tomorrow night we'll all be back in Zoom world with Dr. Evans. And of course, Mr. Wilder from the high school. The budget revote PR meeting that I attended, I want to take this opportunity to thank some people, also as what Mr. Groden had said, but to extend a little bit on that. I want to thank Courtney Bonfante, who's our PR person, who really helped us put together a way of getting this out without it costing us a lot of money. And I think it really was beneficial in a fiduciary responsible manner, which made, of course, Mrs. Fela very happy. So we thank you, Mrs. Bonfante, for that. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our board clerk, Janet Montez, who put the entire election in a very weird way when things are coming back and forth from the governor's office on how this can get done, and it's different than the norm. I want to thank her on behalf of the board and the community for the work that it took to make the changes and set up those election sites and make sure the signage was there and absentee ballots were sent out appropriately and in a timely fashion. And to all of those workers who worked the polls, who took the risk to be in that environment. We can meet as many CDC guidelines as we possibly can and are required to do, but the reality is you can still catch this. We don't know enough about the virus, and they were willing to take the risk, and we appreciate their efforts. And also to our staff who worked in the buildings to make sure our signage was up and all of those things. We thank you very much. And to our community who came out and supported this overwhelmingly. We can't thank you enough. You heard our message, you heard what we had to say, and I'm glad that we're not part of the 11 that didn't pass. We can now say that we passed. And with that said, lastly, Mrs. Fela, Dr. Evans, and I know Dr. Silver is not watching tonight because I know where he is and he's not watching tonight, but he can see this in its rerun. The three of you guided us through a very tumultuous time of this budget. It was a very bizarre election cycle. It was bizarre how everything happened. This board was well informed as to what the needs were, what we could do, what we couldn't do, and what that would mean. We then shared the message beyond the walls of central office to make it happen. We thank the community members, and there were many out there who supported us and understood the need for this to happen, but it could not have happened without your guidance and getting us to where we needed to get to. You know, we came in, as I said at our last meeting, fiscally responsible from the very first budget, and that was because of your efforts, Mrs. Stella. The fact that that budget didn't pass has nothing to do with the work that you did to ensure that we would have what we needed for our students and our school community, but to be able to say that we won't have to cut things. Now, that said, I also want to remind the community, we still don't know about state aid. So we don't know what's coming down the pike, but we do know for the moment, we are in good shape to move forward from a budgetary standpoint. And then we'll wait and see what happens to our state aid and what happens with federal dollars. So thank you again to Mrs. Fella, Dr. Evans, and Dr. Silver. I also attended several NYSSMA reopening of school meetings where I got to hear from across the state what's going on, as well as NICEA meetings. Most people know what NYSSMA is. NICEA is the New York State Council of Educators Associations. I happen to be their state secretary. So we have been meeting on a pretty regular basis it's the largest representation of all the organizations. NYSSMA's part of it, NYSSMA's part of it, NISCUS is part of it. NISCUS is the Council of Superintendents, business associations. The PTAs are part of it, the School Boards Association, you name it, along with the professional organizations across the board with regard to the different bargaining units and things of that nature, and the professional sites. The opening plans are very, very different across the state, and people are still very weary. But the information in those meetings has been invaluable. And when I hear things, I pick up the phone and call Dr. Evans and say, hey, I heard, what about, is this possible? And I know that it's moving forward within what the constraints are with every district, because every district has different needs. We are not Scarsdale. We're not Scarsdale. We're not. It's that simple. We are Monticello, and we will make this happen according to what we have within our abilities. So thank you with regard to that. Any questions around the table from the reports from our directors? Okay, thank you. Moving on. The DSIP plan, which we basically have already heard from Dr. Ola Marks on, so it's just a repeat in there with regard to information. And the reopening plan is also in the same spot. So we'll move on to capital projects update by Dr. Evans.
So thank you, Lori. It's moving along rather well. We've had some decent weather. One of the things, though, that came up in the last owners meeting, and I'm going to defer this over to Ms. Fela in a second, is that we need to start planning for the next phase of construction. So that's been put to us by the construction management firm and the contractors. So Ms. Fela, do you want to talk a little bit about what that might look like and who should be involved in that process?
Sure. So when the $54 million bond was passed, we had broken that down into several tasks, and we did the roof project for middle school and all the elementary schools, and we're currently doing the high school and the bus garage. And the next task that we think we should address quickly and hopefully get up to SED for approval so that we can start construction in the spring would be the tennis courts. So in this project is the tennis court construction, and it kind of would fit nicely. And so I think we did a board member or two on that building committee with the construction manager and the architect. The architect has submitted to me a proposal for the tennis court work, but I wanted to bring it to the board and see how you wanted to move forward.
So we do have the committee people on that are Mr. Crumley, myself, and Mrs. Sharoff are the three board members who are on there.
The owners committee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So those are the three board members that are on there. And then, of course, whoever else that we would need from the department, which would be, I'm assuming, Kurt Budenhagen would, be part of that, possibly Tutu Gupta with regard to looking at that design. So I think what we do is, Mrs. Sal, if we could find out maybe in a schedule when this would work. Dr. Evans, of course, would be there. You would be there. The usual players with regard to that, so that we can start taking a look at the design. And if we can see if there's a place that we can do that where we can socially distance, if they need to do it, or can we do it virtually as well to make it even easier for them?
Yes, to both, I would imagine.
Yep.
but we'll look into that. And we also, Ms. Fela, we were also told that they're going to start providing more regular updates directly to the board.
Yes, at the owners meeting, their construction manager is going to be doing a monthly memo that we'll be sharing directly with the board on the progress of this bus garage and high school project.
Great, thank you. Any questions from anybody around the board? Mr. Crumley?
About 8-9 months ago, didn't we view 3 different plans that were put before us for the tennis courts? I can't remember if that was just for our viewing pleasure of the 3 ideas, or if, I can't remember if we actually did anything in terms of saying, we like this one or something like that.
It was location, location, location. Where were we going to place it on the grounds, if I recall?
It was all the same location. It was just 3 different configurations in the same location. So that was just 3 ideas. They were ballparking all for that same location.
Right. Because
Does that play into, I assume they want to put a push on it. Does that play into any of their groundwork they're doing on the science technology, you know, the 200 wing?
And I think they also have a really good general contractor on site. So
Yeah.
if we can time it so that maybe we can get this person to bid and he can still, you know, guarantee work for his crew.
And only pave that parking lot once instead of having it paved twice because you run 20,000 pound equipment over it.
Exactly.
Nothing like an errant bulldozer.
Any other questions around the board? Thank you very, very much. So Dr. Evans, anything else with regard to capital project?
There was a small design change in one of the rooms in the high school. The initial design had a partition that was going to partition the room from the hallway. It was kind of seen as like a convertible room, open space for classes to meet in. And we found out that, well, it wasn't news to me, but that in order to do that, we would need to have 2 people closing the partition at the same time. Excuse me, and that in an emergency situation, it would not be ideal for 2 people to be holding buttons down while that partition closed. So there was a redesign that was proposed, and we ran it by some members of the committee, Stephen Lewis and Stephen Wilder, and we accepted the architect's new design, which basically has 2 fairly conventional doors with windows as kind of the open viewing space between the hallway and the room. So it's a little bit more compliant than it was before. It was compliant before, just really not ideal for an emergency situation. But that's it for a capital project update.
Thank you very much. Policy doesn't meet until September again. Correspondence, outcomes, nothing. Upcoming events are listed there. I do want to clarify for the board members. I did ask Dr. Evans regarding summer school graduation, what was going on with that. Summer school graduation has always taken place in August after the students have graduated. This year, the decision was made that all students would partake in the virtual graduation so that they had the experience of a graduation. And because not knowing what August would look like and if we would be able to hold anything anyway. So the students they've already technically graduated, so we will not be holding a summer school graduation as we normally do. We will do that again in the future so that students are not walking before they've actually graduated. But I do know, and Dr. Ola Marks has shared with us, that we have a number of students who are graduating in August, who are part of the cohort of this year, who will be official graduates come August, I don't know, 16, 17, something like that. So congratulations to those students. Moving on from there, community events, I'm sure they're going on, but we're not dealing with them. Questions and comments from the public. I know Ms. Montez, you sent me something, so I will deal with that one. Do you have anything else other than that one?
No.
Okay, thank you. There was during the presentation of the opening, hold on, because I've got to go to some more devices to get to where I need to get to it. So again, part of public comment is I can't mention names, so I'm going to eliminate where the names are and paraphrase in those areas. And then we will address it from there. So this is from Phil Borco from Rock Hill. Of course, we do that so that we've got that for the record. And he says, I have reviewed the reopening plans in the agenda and I'm now listening to the presentation. I find the details to be incredibly lacking and not comparable to the details other districts have already provided. I find that unacceptable. The fact that we can't figure out a way to bring back students even in a hybrid model on time when school is supposed to start should not even be considered. The elephant in the room is the quality of the remote learning from a year ago. It was, to be generous, not good. What definitive improvements have been made and will continue to be made to make that better and would give me a reason not to seek alternative or homeschooling options. Additionally, despite what is being said about how remote learning will work, synchronous learning must be viable and made to work. Let's use technology to our advantage. The fact that we are planning for months and that this is what was developed and shared is terribly disappointed. Respectfully submitted, Phil Borco. So our policy is not to respond and to give 48 hours to do that. However, Mr. Borco, I think in some of the conversation that I had earlier, I think you understand where this is coming from. Nothing is set in stone at this point. We are still continuing to design. Parents will be made aware based upon the timeline that was given as to what things are, but that doesn't mean things won't change from there. Synchronous technology is something that, yes, we'd love to have, but the reality is we have students that don't even have capabilities of getting technology. So there are a lot of things that have gone into this. And we're sorry that you're disappointed. The bottom line is, and I'm going to say this because I've said this in my other meetings, there's no right or wrong answer to this at all, because there is no right or wrong answer to this. We're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't, no matter how we open, because the difference is it's not the best learning, and we all know that. This is not what's best for kids. This is what we can do within the constraints that have been set upon us. So we're sorry that you're disappointed. I will leave at this particular scenario, I will leave it up to Dr. Evans and Dr. Oler Marks to address it back into a comment to you when they can actually see this letter, because it gets sent to me to read into record. But I will let them carry on and have further dialogue with you to answer some more of your details should they be able to do that at this time. They may not be able to do that until we get answers from parents as to what they're fully seeking. And again, where our financial needs are and where that holds. With that said, Dr. Evans, do you want to address any of that?
I'll follow up with the parent tomorrow with details.
Thank you very much. I'll make sure, Mrs. Montez, if you would be so kind to please send that email to Dr. Evans so that he's got it as well.
Yes, we'll do that.
Thank you. Moving on from there, superintendent's update.
Thank you, Madam President. So several topics, obviously, to review, and many that have already been discussed. We had a budget vote completed yesterday. In that budget vote, the voters approved our revised budget proposal, as many of you know. And just to reiterate the appreciation I have for the Board of Education, Ms. Montez, Ms. Bonfante, Ms. Fela, our administrators, and the voters who came out and voted yesterday, and the workers of the elections as well. Much appreciated. Dr. Oler Marks presented earlier the school opening plans, and you'll forgive me for being kicked off my internet service around that time. But one thing I think that bears careful repeating is the requirement that any in-person instruction, that social distancing is maintained at all times to the greatest extent possible. And that should social distancing be compromised, that masks or partitions be brought into play. So when it comes to things like transportation, we are suddenly going from buses that carry around 30 to 40 students comfortably to only 11 or 12. When we're looking at classroom spaces, very often that's limiting classroom spaces to 50% of traditional capacity. And as Dr. Oler Marks, she referenced Rutherford before, But if you think of a building like the high school, there is no common hallway entrance for students. They just walk into a hallway that's, maybe 10 feet wide. That is going to be a challenge for foot traffic. Not to mention the requirements of screening students for temperature taking every day, as well as staff. So these are all logistical issues that our administrators are currently working on to resolve in as appropriate a manner as possible. We do plan to have full details to inform parents to make a proper decision within 2 weeks. As Dr. Orley Marks mentioned, there will be information packets sent home to parents that will inform them and allow them to make informed decisions. And when we're talking about remote learning, we agree with the concern that what was provided in the spring was not really acceptable. It was a get-by. It was a get-by across the state. And the state education department has given strict guidelines on what remote learning should look like. And that includes contact time for students in content areas in grades 7 through 12, as well as contact time for elementary students. So our committees have looked at that closely, and it is being woven into the plan. What's important to know is that the plan, we have to submit some type of plan that's full of assurances to the state education department by Friday, but we really have until the beginning of September to get it right for students and staff. And we intend on getting it right for students and staff. But we also are going to make sure that our parents are fully informed of the options made available to them. With that being said, we had our administrators retreat earlier this week, and for 2 hours of that session, we had Erin O'Grady, parent, provide a legal update on those guidance documents, and much of it was seen on the NYSBA legal webinar, but she did share this presentation, and you probably can't see it there, but bullet number 1 is to ensure the health and safety of students and staff. That is paramount. And bullet 2, issues of educational equity are at the forefront of thinking and decision making. So you will see that throughout our plans, not only the plans that have been uploaded thus far, but also the plans moving forward. So much more to come on that. As you may be aware, we had a minor flooding event in our district office the weekend before last. That was on July 19th, a hose that was connected to a faucet in a custodial closet, and that was company installed. It was installed according to the way it should have been. That ruptured, and that caused a minor flooding in our district offices. Luckily, our custodial staff and ServPro responded promptly, and were able to minimize the loss there. And it looks like we might have to replace some small pieces of sheetrock and drywall, but more to come on that. But the damages do appear to be minimal, and possibly some floor tiles as well, carpeted tiles. As Mr. Crumley mentioned before, I've been holding Meet the Superintendent nights for all of our schools except for the Monticello High School. That is tomorrow night at 6 p.m., I believe. Don't hold me to that. That is on the website.
It's at 6.
6, thank you. That is the final of this round of Meet the Superintendent nights, and I have found this format to be very productive and informative, not only for parents and attendees, but also me, because it gives me a good idea about what the concerns are among the public. I've also been visiting our school buildings and facilities, and as I mentioned before, given the social distancing limitations that are put upon our classrooms, when we talk about the high school in particular, where there is a significant capital project going on, there is a real premium on space. So we are looking at possibilities such as St. John Street School for additional classroom space, potentially for high school students, but much more of that will be forthcoming should we opt for that as an option. And then lastly, a special appreciation for Assemblywoman Aileen Gunther and Senator Jennifer Metzger, whose sponsored bills in the Assembly and the Senate have been passed and are now awaiting action by the governor. Those are our building aid forgiveness bills. You may recall that due to a clerical error, the district may be penalized for not completing paperwork in a proper fashion. That will be to the tune of $1.9 million. This paperwork goes back to the early aughts, as I understand it. So this is many years old, and the state education department has changed the rules in that process, and other districts in a similar situation to ours have received that forgiveness from the governor. So this bill has been adopted, has been passed through the Assembly before and the New York State Senate. It has done so again, and we are awaiting the governor's action on that bill. But again, a special appreciation to Assemblywoman Gunther and Senator Metzger for their support of us in that process. That is the report that was.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. And yes, it's over 20 years ago that none of the board members sitting here, none of the administrators sitting here, none of the people at State Ed who made their error by not informing the district 20 some odd years ago are even still in the conversation. And yet that's what it's supposed to cost us. So hopefully the governor will be wise and do what he has done for so many other school districts, especially knowing the fiscal responsibilities that districts are under right now. But we do thank both Assemblywoman Gunther and Senator Metzger for their hard work and dedication to that. And moving on from there, Assistant Superintendent for Business, Mrs. Fair.
So you have your regular budget status, claims auditor, and school lunch profit and loss for the month of May. And the only other thing under my report is the SRO contract with the Village of Monticello PD. We took the contract we've had before, but we added additional language for school closures in the event of COVID. And the village had a board meeting this morning and they passed a resolution and approved that contract. So we're asking the board to do the same. And I did talk to the sheriff's department and they are working on their contract as well. So I'm waiting to hear from Under Sheriff Chaboti on that one.
Thank you, Ms. Jersey.
I noticed that on the resolution that the village passed this morning, it says that it's an agreement from September 3rd, 2015.
That might be there. That came with the contract. So that was their resolution that they wrote and we just uploaded it for your information. I'm not sure why. It might be the same. Well, it might be the first year that we had the SRO with the village. So I'd have to go back and look at that. But that's their.
I can tell you that is the first year you had the contract with the village because I knew who the principal was in 2014. So I know when they came back in.
I just want to make sure that
Mrs.
it's not based upon a contract that they don't have no longer with the police department that we're paying, because it says we're paying for 84 hours and school's not open that long. So I want to make sure that it's in the same as what the contract is for the police.
Yeah, the agreement is that they signed is for the 2021 school year. Does that make sense?
So we're signing the agreement for the 2021 and the fact that their contract says what it is, we do an annual contract. So it's just the annual component of it. Am I correct on that, Mrs. Vela?
Yeah, and then we're approving the contract that our attorneys drew up. So that's just, their resolution came with the signed contract. So I had Ms. Montez uploaded for your information, but that has no bearing on what we're doing.
So their resolution started in that year. However, the contract has to be annually renewed. So we're approving this year's contract.
Yes.
Yeah, the document the board is acting upon is the contract that the Village Board of Monticello actually signed. That's a 7-page agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense, Ms. Jersey?
Well, we're giving a resolution that has no date of the contract that I see on it. That's why I'm confused.
On the school resource officer agreement,
right.
The agreement is made this day, 29th day of July, 2020, between the Board of Ed and the Village of Monticello. So it's the 7-page document. Their document is just documentation showing that their village board acted. But the contract that the district, the board is acting upon is the 7-page SRO village agreement PDF.
No, I understand. I'm saying that they signed the agreement based upon the resolution, which gave them authority to sign the agreement. So if the resolution that they're acting upon to give them authority is not valid, that was my concern.
Well, we could table it and we could run it by our attorneys for an interpretation. But that's, we could do that. We're not, SROs would not be showing up to our schools until September anyway, at the earliest. If that's what the board wants to do, we can do that for further legal guidance.
What's the pleasure of the board? Would you like to see it tabled so that we get that answered? Or do you feel comfortable you can vote on it tonight? I need those. So how many people feel that they can vote on it tonight? And how many people would like to see it tabled?
Can you give me like 30 seconds, just a quick?
Yep.
30 seconds.
Okay, so I see Mrs. Sharrow said she's ready to vote on it tonight. Ms. Galligan said she's ready to vote on it tonight.
I do, however, Ms. Jersey, recognize the dates being, raising a question for sure.
I have no problem dating it, seeing as how sometimes the village is a little war torn.
Okay, so we've got 3.
I'm
So-
fine doing it tonight. The second whereas in their resolution, it says the parties are desirous of entering into a new 1-year agreement with an option for additional years, which is attached, and it's not attached. My guess is that it says it started in 2015 and this is a new year based on the attached. So I'm okay with saying that this is legitimate.
The wording in there is because I think all they did was they took a resolution and just moved it from the last year to this year to this, and they just keep moving it. Is probably what is happening.
Yeah.
I'll jump on Mrs. Holmes' bandwagon there.
Okay, so you're saying yes, Mr. Crumley, you could vote on it tonight? Okay,
I'm
Mr.
comfortable.
Sheriff, you're comfortable, and Ms. Doherty said she's comfortable, so we're gonna vote on it tonight.
I will
based
though
on
talk
that.
to legal counsel just to make sure.
Okay, thank you. And considering they're not in until September, we can always rescind if we find out something different. But let's get it off the docket for now. Thank you. So moving on from there, anything else from your end, Mrs. Thela? Okay, and unless you want to speak again, Dr. Oler Marks, I'm going to skip right past your little segment here. Is that all right? Okay. So with that said, Mr. Crumley.
I move that we accept as a group action items T1 through T8.
Do we have a second on that? Made by Mrs. Greco. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? So ordered, Mr. Crumley.
I move that we approve as a group action items T1 through T8.
Second on that, Ms. Galligan. Any discussion? All in favor? Any
Wait, I have
opposed?
discussion.
Okay, so you gotta give me a
I
base.
did.
Okay.
So on item 2, the Visnets agreement, I think I'm butchering that name.
Business.
Visnets. So I think that the dates are wrong. It says this agreement made on the 5th day of September 2019.
I can answer that question because it actually came up through a board member already that we've answered it back. So the contract is actually, Mrs. Thela, correct me again if I'm incorrect, or it's Dr. Oler Marks knows this information. It's actually, the dates on that are correct. It's because of how their fiscal year works against ours. So they will be coming to us again for a new contract in September. So am I correct on that? I see head shaking. So the dates as that's stipulated is correct because of how their fiscal calendar does not align to our fiscal calendar. So the dates are correct, and it covers the person who was giving the services during COVID.
I see. So they were doing services without a contract?
They had a contract which was from last year, so they had to extend because of the circumstances of
Oh.
COVID. So yes, so their new
Okay.
contract does not start until September, and there'll be a new contract for September
Okay.
for us. So our fiscal year starts in July, theirs starts in September. So we're just finishing up this component of the contract based upon what we agreed upon a year ago.
Okay.
How did I do on that, guys? Did I learn well?
Yes, they're for Title I services. So there's agreements that are made between the district and the non-public school for title services. Generally speaking, we like to have those contracts go along with whatever that mutual understanding is between the non-public school and the district. However, we are required to provide Title I services in non-public schools. So we were required to give those services. Probably would have been preferred to have that contract going into a year than where we are currently, but we'll tighten that up for the new year, which does start September 1st. The new title year starts September 1st.
So with that said, any other points of discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? So ordered. Mr. Crumley,
I move that we approve action item T9 as a roll call vote.
second on that. Made by Mrs. Greco. Any discussion? Okay, Mrs. Montez, you're on.
Timothy Crumley. Kathleen Doherty.
You're on mute, Lori.
She said aye.
Thank you. Wendy Galligan. You're on mute too.
Aye.
Todd Groden. Todd, are you there?
He's connecting to audio according to the camera, so let's move on and he can come back in.
Okay. Jennifer Holmes.
Aye.
Helen Jersey.
Aye.
Adriana Mason Greco.
Aye.
Lori Oristano James.
Aye.
Stacy Sharoff.
Aye.
Todd Groden. He's still connecting, right?
He's still connecting, so he might have storms in his area.
Okay. Well, motion carries.
Thank you very much. And considering that that's for the revote, yes, thank you very much. Correspondence, you all saw what was in the correspondence area. Again, information all over the place. But what's really nice is even in the middle of COVID, having some of these amazing things happening with and for our students is outstanding. And we thank our teachers, the administration, and everybody who is making sure that we're making their lives as normal as possible under these under this situation. So with that said, any additional questions and comments from the public, Mrs. Montez?
There are none.
Thank you very much. So with that said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, but not before reminding anybody to sign on tomorrow at 6 o'clock to see Dr. Evans with the high school. So motion to adjourn made by Ms. Jersey, seconded by Ms. Galligan. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you all very much, and I will see you all tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. Be well.
Good night.